Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Bunker. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from an anonymous caller. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Hi, Lloyd. You can play this message if you choose to. I'd rather not say my name. I first want to say thank you for even allowing me the opportunity to have some communication with you. It's kind of an honor. My 4 members out of 5 of my family either faded or left the religion between about 7 and 5 years ago. And I think you were totally instrumental in that for all of us, not just the direct education about what was going on in the religion, but developing critical thinking skills, stuff like that. So thank you so much. My question is about brainwashing and the use of the word brainwashing. I'm a sociology major right now. I'm in my junior year. At the beginning of my leaving, I took an intro to sociology class, and I just dropped the class when my professor said brainwashing is not possible. You need to consent to belief. And I interpreted that as, oh, this person is saying cults aren't real. And now I'm in a sociological theory class, and my professor also said brainwashing is impossible, and that if you're brainwashed, you have a choice in it, basically. I kind of got into a bit of a debate with her about that because I said it can be perceived as victim blaming, and I kind of talked about my background, and basically she said, you know, yes, it is true that you can be coerced, and social control is real. Cults are real. They usually prey upon people whose agency is in some way impaired. But ultimately, people have a choice in what they believe. We kind of talked about kids because kids are taught, not brainwashed, basically, is what she said. To an extent, I agree with that. I think it gets a little fuzzy when, we interpret that at age 18, you can make a fully informed decision. And there's something magical about being an adult versus being a child, which I think is kind of taken away when you're raised in that. Okay, I'm kind of rambling now, but I guess I just wanted to ask, so for a little more background, right now I'm working as a peer specialist for mental health conditions. And I would like to be getting involved in some sort of advocacy for, people who've had experiences like me in Jehovah's Witnesses or other high control situations. And I really want to be mindful of the terminology that I use. I'm still kind of stuck on thinking brainwashing is possible. But if that term, stops people from taking things seriously, I don't want to use it. So I guess, and I understand that you don't have necessarily a formal education in this, but if you have any thoughts about the word brainwashing and using the term, I would love to hear them. And thank you again so much for listening. I'm totally fangirling right now over being able to talk to you. So thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Well, thank you for that wonderful message. Thank you for the kind words about the channel and my work. I'm really glad to hear that it's been helpful for you and some of your family members. You say just towards the end there, I'm aware you have no formal education. It's not just that I don't have any formal education. I don't have any education. You are better educated than I am when it comes to psychology and cults. And this is why I make it a habit of routinely in these voicemail videos referring people to professional help and essentially referring people to people like you who know what they're talking about and understand how the mind works, because the mind is an incredibly complicated thing. And I think it's important that, especially when it comes to mental health, there are people like yourself who dedicate themselves to understanding these incredibly complex issues so that they can help people navigate these issues surrounding cults and help them heal from negative cult experiences. I'm very sad to hear the pushback you've been getting, seemingly from educated academics who simply don't have much experience, it sounds like, in cults. Now, ultimately, you're asking about the specific word brainwashing, and I actually took the opportunity recently. I knew I had your voicemail and I knew I was interviewing Dr. Stephen Hassan. And so I took the opportunity to basically explain the gist of your voicemail to Dr. Hassan. I might as well share how that conversation went. Part of the problem is kind of at an academic level. Let me just highlight one example of this, which was someone who called in recently. I do voicemails. I let my viewers call in with voicemails. And I had someone call in who is an ex-Jehovah's Witness and also a sociology major in their junior year. And they wanted to do something on brainwashing. And their professor said that brainwashing is not passable. You need consent to belief. People have a choice. Kids are taught, not brainwashed. So it feels as though the word brainwashing is a problematic word in the scientific community. Is that fair? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, brainwashing is a sloppy word. It was coined by the CIA. It depicts an incorrect image of what happens when you're being unduly influenced, because the mind is not a blackboard with chalk beliefs written on it that you take a sponge and you wash the brains and then you can write new things on it. We have neurons. That's how we, store information, memories, etc. And depending on neuronal networked connections, you can hack someone's mind and make them believe, especially use of altered states of consciousness techniques like hypnosis. You can bypass people's critical thinking and make them believe things that they would never ordinarily believe, or make them do things they would never do. And that's a big myth that's still promulgated about hypnosis. Oh, you can't do anything in trance that you wouldn't ordinarily do. BS.
Well, let's put brainwashing to one side then, because I take your point about it being sloppy, but let's replace it with mind control. Is it not fair that mind control, there's some skepticism in the academic community over whether that's a thing?
What does it mean to be mind control? Again, what images? And it's like do. But for me, I've lived this, and I've worked with thousands of people who've been harmed. Undue influence is a term used by the legal system, but in my forensic think tank at Harvard Medical School, I had a lot of reaction from a few of the psychiatrists saying, no, you can't use undue influence to talk about cults. Because it's a specific meaning, which I disagreed with. And I recently interviewed a law professor in Canada, Francis Chapman, who's been writing on undue influence and saying it absolutely is a good term versus due influence, ethical influence, unethical influence. I struggle, honestly, with what to call it. Obviously I wrote a book.
Well, this is what frustrates me, Stephen. I don't think you should have to struggle. It frustrates me that you seem to be pushing against this refusal to accept what is patently obvious, namely the fact that certain groups and individuals, given the right circumstances, can wield certain techniques in order to control people's behavior. And that's what we're talking about when we say mind control. Yep. And it feels as though there is an aversion in the academic community, or should I put it more bluntly, a denialism in the academic community that is the case.
Yes, I no, I think we're aligned. I would also point to social psychology and the fundamental attribution error is at work. That unless people are exposed to that concept, that we have an unconscious bias as human beings to look at other human beings and why they're doing what they're doing and assume it's more dispositional or personality based versus social environmental contextually based, social influence based. And the science says we're information beings. We're constantly requiring information coming in, and you can overload somebody, sleep deprive them, and their ability to digest and sort and parse what's true and what isn't true diminishes as the cognitive skills decline. So the bottom line is I don't have a good word for how to help. What's a better word than deprogram? I hate the word deprogramming, but I've had to use it because that's what the media uses to describe a deconversion effort. Or because for me it's not deconverting, it's more empowering people to think for themselves. That's the frame that fits for me as a former cult member. My company is called Freedom of Mind. They say it's your mind, you should control it, not look outside yourself to some external authority figure to tell you what to think, what to feel, how to act, and what to believe. And I urge people to adopt kind of the scientific method in their life. You know, whatever's true, let's be open to changing our mind. If there's factual evidence that's convincing, that helps explain reality or really can be replicated, let's let's take out my ego from the bite model. And I say this, if someone can come up with a better scientific model to help discern what's due influence and what's undue influence, I'll shift, because all I care about is wanting to help our species and the planet survive.
So I was really glad of the opportunity to get Dr. Hassan's input on your question, on your conundrum. I think his advice was interesting and helpful. Ultimately, it seems to all boil down to an aversion on the part of academics to the entire concept that something like a human being can be programmed. I think that's in essence what we're dealing with here. And you have to remember that, you know, many psychologists will come from perhaps religious backgrounds where they're indoctrinated to think of human beings as more than simply advanced primates, but as beings that have some kind of elevated status, beings that cannot simply be programmed or reprogrammed by external influences. And I honestly believe that's where much of this is coming from. Much of this aversion from the academic community. They just don't like to think of human beings as being essentially computers that can be reprogrammed. But your experience with cults, my experience with cults, and what I'm seeing elsewhere from people who've had experiences with other cult groups, all of that tells me, yes, you can be reprogrammed. You can be brainwashed. Although I do accept what Dr. Hassan was saying, that brainwashing is perhaps a sloppy word. It's perhaps a word that describes very clumsily or inadequately the way cult indoctrination works. And if we can get further along in the conversation by using alternative phrases, it's irritating that we need to do that, by the way. It's irritating that we need to water down our language to be listened to. But if we do need to use terms such as undue influence to get listened to, I think it's worthwhile doing that, at least until hopefully at some future point, the academic community catches up with this. I just feel, and I feel this way about lots of these issues. I feel this way about, the legal system, the fact that groups like Jehovah's Witnesses are given a free pass when it comes to their abusive practices. I feel like we're just living at the wrong point in history. We're just living at a point where the people in the academic community who need to recognize this issue of mind control and what cults do and how they do it don't understand this issue enough yet. There will be advancement on this. Future generations of academics, of psychologists, of influencers within the academic community, future generations will get this, and there won't be as much denialism on this subject, because what you've described, some of these responses, you need to consent to belief. You have a choice. Kids are taught, not brainwashed. I don't care whether the person who said all of these things has a PhD. I don't care where they were educated. Those statements are nonsense. I just do not care what the credentials are of the people who've said this to you. They are talking nonsense, because when you are a child being raised in a cult, how are you supposed to know that what you're being told as fact is something that's purely a belief that's being held by a fringe group and not something that's supported by science, not something that can be rationally or logically explained? That is not how it's put to you when you're a child growing up in a fundamentalist group. You are sold these lies as though they are fact. And I found it interesting when you mentioned that one of the professors said that cults typically prey on people who are, quote, agency impaired. Their agency has been impaired. Well, isn't your agency impaired when you are a child? Don't you have a bit less agency when you're just going to trust whatever it is your parents tell you? And you simply do not have the critical thinking skills and, frankly, the life experience to identify the fact that you're being indoctrinated into a religious group, one that could be, in many cases, is harmful and detrimental to your well-being. So this has descended into a little bit of a rant on my part, but hopefully somewhere in everything that I've said, you'll have found something helpful. Basically, it all boils down to you're on the right track. You're not going mad. Brainwashing is a thing. It is victim blaming to suggest that people who get roped into cults have a choice in it and they're willingly and knowingly deluding themselves. If what you need is some kind of solidarity and some kind of validation, I am here to give it to you in spades. You are not going crazy. That said, until the academic community catches on to what's going on with cults and how they operate, I do accept that perhaps we need to be more careful with how we use our words, with what language we employ. And if undue influence is the word I need to use in order to persuade someone who is an academic who doesn't take mind control or brainwashing seriously, that's the phrase I'm happy to use, as long as we're able to move things forward and as long as ultimately we're able to help people. And I think you're to be commended for, again, committing yourself to education and to training that's going to put you in a position to help people. That's an incredibly commendable and laudable thing that you're doing, and I wish you every success in that. So that's pretty much all I have to say on this. If you would like to leave a voicemail, the thing to do is go to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to share your message on my channel. But that's all we have time for. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.